Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's Marsha Casper Cook, and I have my editor here, Jeff Fleischer. And I was just thinking myself how many years I actually know him, and how many he was at college, and he was in school with my son. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is a lot of years that I know him. And he's been editing even I sent him stuff when he was in college. So I guess I've known him a long time, like 30 years. I'm thinking, oh my God. So, hi, Jeff. How you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I mean, I was just thinking about that today. It's a long time.
Yeah, we just had a high school reunion, so it's
Yes. Were
good to
you
catch up.
there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Was it fun?
It was.
Yeah. I heard, well, we had a snowstorm, so I'm not sure if a lot of people came because of that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, did a lot of people come?
probably 60s,
Yeah. See,
65.
I love reunions. Most of my friends don't. They don't want to go. I have to drag them on any reunion. We had a reunion from the high school, but nobody ever a lot of people don't want to go. I love to go to reunions. I think it's fun seeing people. But so I'm glad at least 60 people because it was a bad snowstorm Saturday.
Yeah.
That Saturday. I don't know. It's hard to say with the weather in Chicago, but like for me, this is too early. I don't mind snow if it's like January. I can handle it. But this is a whole extra month. So do you think that'll be better for us? Maybe it'll end in March instead of April.
Well, we'll
You
see.
know, we'll see. But we're in Chicago. Jeff's in Chicago also. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. So I'm the author of 8 different books, seven nonfiction, one fiction. The fiction one's a short story collection that came out last year called Animal Husbandry. The nonfiction ones are some civics books, a climate change book, a book on revolutionaries throughout history. And so I was a journalist for a really long time. I still do some of that. But I edit books for other people. I edit for a policy think tank. I've written a lot of newspaper, magazine, um, online content. I used to work in e-learning, so I have a lot of different writing background and kind of like synthesize all that into the writing I do.
And you have a lot of books that you have several books that you talk about, politics where
Right.
for young people. So do you want to talk just a little bit about that? Say what, how it helps the kids.
Oh, sure. So the first one of those is a book called Votes of Confidence that first came out in 2016. And then we did an all new edition in 2020 and another all new edition in 2024. And it explains kind of how the electoral process works. So now things like the mechanics of the electoral college, to how voting registration works, the different rules around the House and the Senate, who does what within government. So it's more of a process book. And then there's
Yeah.
another one I put out last year called Civic Minded that's more policy focused. So it gets
Yeah.
into more things like how Medicare and Medicaid are different from each other, or how the immigration process works, or even things like how does someone start a new national park. So it's more about like the nuts and bolts of policy.
Which I think a lot of people don't know. And it's because even if I think your audience is high school probably, but I think adults can read this book because
Oh yeah.
we didn't learn a lot of this when we were in school, and if you did, you forgot it, and everything is different. 2025 was, right now, today, everything is different.
Well,
So, and people are much more curious about elections and things that
well,
go on.
well, and also they don't do civics education in schools as much as they used to, and so
I
it's
know.
it's written for high school, but realistically, like most YA books, a lot of adults read them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for some people, it's more of a refresher of things they did learn back in fourth grade and haven't heard since. And for
Right.
others, it's more the first time
Or
they're hearing
ever,
it.
or
Yeah.
ever, because if younger people, they're not, they don't have to take the Constitution test anymore. All of those things that where people had to do before,
Right.
and even a person like me, sometimes things come back in my head that I learned that I didn't even think they were in my. I go like, oh, I remember that, So I think it is important to know these things because somewhere, somehow, later on in life, you might think and you go like, oh, I do remember that, it's something I learned. And I think kids, that's important because they're going to have to vote.
Well, and also civics is a moving target. Like it's different every 4 years. And so part of the reason
Yeah.
why we do an updated edition is things like what states have the most electoral votes does change, or
Yeah.
how voting laws in different states changes.
Yeah.
Tax rates change. And so all those things are different every 4 years. So even if they were really well versed in what they were 8 years ago, it's going to be different now.
Right, which is, but the basics, you give a lot of the basics in your books, and I think people, it's good to know the basics, because you need to know what to look for, because I've asked you that question myself, how do you pick, someone to vote? for.
Mhm.
You just don't. You can't. Now everything is online, and there's so much bad press about this one or that one. But when you actually have to go to that voting booth or
Mhm.
or vote at home, you should know who you're voting for. Because I've asked, like, in your book does explain a lot of things. Like, I've asked you about judges,
Mhm.
how people pick the judges and things like that, because I have heard people say, oh, you know what? I didn't vote for the judges. Doesn't mean anything, but it does matter.
Right. And one of the things I try to talk about a lot in that book, because there are a lot of books about the federal presidential election,
Yeah.
but they don't really talk about states and localities, and also primaries, because primaries are really important and we don't talk about them as much. But deciding who the candidates for Senate are going to be
Yes, it's
is in many
important.
ways more important. That's how
Yeah.
you get whoever's going to eventually be the senator.
So advice, my advice to people is, you can, adults that are out there and don't know a lot of these things, there's his books do explain everything that you need to know, because before you go to vote, if you do it at home or you go to the polls, you should have some idea. So there's an election coming up in November. So I mean, if you get a chance, look up his books, because I think they help
Mhm.
people understand what to do, because a lot of people, when they get to their voting to the voting places, they just look at it and they really don't know what to do. So they leave a lot of it open, which doesn't help. That's really not a good thing.
Well, and all through the coming year, like every member of the
Yeah.
U.S. House of Representatives is going to be up for re-election in November, or it'll
Yeah.
be an open
Yeah.
seat, but every seat's going to be open. And so not only do you have to know who that is, but also the primaries for both parties in those races is going to determine who's actually facing off
Yeah.
in
Because
November.
it matters,
Starts way earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And it does matter, because I have heard people all the time, and I always have a show, like to talk about voting, and your books are really easy to read. And so I think people should take a look at them, because, it really matters. It does, and people are very confused these days about every single subject. So I think, that's a good thing. So I hope you listen, get a chance to read. Your books are in audio also.
Um,
Is that book in audio? I don't know if that one is.
no, Votes of
No.
Confidence, the 2016 edition went in audio briefly, but the others have
Okay.
not.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fiction book's an audiobook, but not the
Right. Right.
nonfiction ones.
Because
Because the
it
nonfiction ones
changes.
also have a lot of like short sidebars and other information and things that make it harder to do in an audio format. Because
Yeah.
they're not
Right.
always like a straightforward story.
Right. 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 But, pick up a copy if you want, because now you have time to learn about who you want to vote for, because I think there are a lot of questions. All right. So let's really start where I like to always start.
Okay.
Okay. So someone comes to me, and you've worked with me on this. They'll go like, oh, I have an idea. I want to write a book, or I've written something. What do I do? So, how do you get your ideas when you think, oh, this is a good idea? I want to write a book about it?
For fiction or for nonfiction, because it's different.
Either. Well, let's do both. So,
Okay.
start with one.
So usually with nonfiction, I have a consistent publisher I work with. So a lot of times I've pitched them, half a dozen different ideas when we meet. And sometimes it'll be a thought process of, well, let's do this one now, let's do this one next, or they may like some ideas more than others. And so usually we're thinking like in a long-term plan, what's the best timing for each book?
Right.
But in a nonfiction, you're not writing the whole book first.
Right.
You're usually writing a table of contents, a general outline, maybe a sample chapter. But in nonfiction, the way you're promoting it to a publisher, even when you've worked with before, is you're talking about your expertise, your experience, and how it fits the subject. And so
Yeah.
when you're selling a book to a nonfiction publisher, you're really selling you and the idea. Whereas in fiction, you're selling the finished product, or at
Yeah.
least the draft of the finished product.
Right.
For fiction book or fiction short stories, especially, a lot of times I don't really have a plan. So sometimes I'll have a phrase or I have a good idea for the beginning of a story, and I'll just sit down and start seeing where it goes.
Right.
Other times I have kind of a loose outline in my head where I know where it's going to wind up because I know what the turn's going to be in the story, but I don't necessarily know how to get there. So I never outline the
Does
short
it
story.
change? Do you ever
Oh
change
yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah. Short stories is really a discovery process,
Yeah.
and I'll do research along the way, and I'll do like some planning, but usually it's just sitting down and working on it. Like right now, I'm working on what I hope will one day be a novel in short stories, so they're all loosely connected to each other.
Yeah.
And I have like a loose outline of ideas that I think would fit the theme. And if I finish them all, I'll try to collect them as a novel. But each one is surprising me as I write it. Like I'm finding new ideas and new things I can do with the characters. Some stories are shorter than I thought they'd be, some are longer.
So is it's all on one subject or just subjects that commingle like?
For this
And
one, it's all people who at some point in their life were coworkers.
oh,
So they don't all know each other, but they all know someone else in the book.
oh,
But
okay.
their
Yeah,
stories aren't connected beyond that.
right. Because I have a lot of people on with anthologies, and they pick a lot of them now pick up. They write them together, but then they pick up where the other one left off, which I find it difficult, but they seem to love it. Writing together a lot of times.
Oh, were you multiple authors?
Yes, because
Mhm.
they put an anthology out, but it's about there's so many different ways that they've been on the show talking about it. Some of them write individual stories, some of them pick up from the last part of the story
Right.
and they just go on. But to me, I find it difficult because when I'm writing, it's in my thoughts. But when you're reading someone else's, I don't know that you could always pick up their characters, but they say it works good. For me, I don't know if it would.
Yeah, I've never really written that way. I've done stories that are inspired by public
Right,
domain works,
right.
where I've been like an anthology would put out a call for submissions of we want stories connected to Edgar Allan Poe, and so I'd write a standalone story that's inspired by Poe,
Right.
but it's not connected to the other stories from my end. It is on their end.
You want to talk about domain a little, talk about that a little, how people can decide to write something and what they have to look for.
So sometimes it's just an idea I have, and I just sit down and start writing. Other times I look at literary magazines and see what they're looking for,
Oh,
because
okay.
sometimes it's fun to have an assignment,
Yeah.
especially when I was first learning to be a short story writer, because I'm self-trained. Like I didn't go to college for short stories. I don't have an MFA, and so I kind of taught myself to be a short story writer. And one thing I did especially early was look at literary magazines and see, oh, this one's looking for stories that are 1,000 words or fewer about pets, or this one's looking for stories inspired by the Wizard of Oz. And so, like writing to their parameters.
What do you do? Just look that up under what? How do you find that? I
Um,
mean,
there's a website called Submittable that has a lot of calls for submission.
oh,
There's
okay.
a magazine called Poets and Writers that every issue has submission calls. And then also just literary magazines you read on their website will have, our next period for submissions is January 1st through March 15th, and we're looking for these things. The theme of this issue is blah, blah, blah. And sometimes
Okay.
there's no theme. Sometimes it's just we want short stories.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're looking around like we want short stories about place, or we want short stories about loss. And so if I have anything I've already finished that fits, I might submit that.
Oh,
But if I don't, sometimes that'll inspire me of like, oh, what would I do in that length about that subject? And then
and
sometimes
they
I'll
give
sit
you the
down and
amount of words, right? Well, I can, for me, like I've done that for the magazine. As soon as they tell me what I need to do, then I write it and then I get it done. But when I'm on my own, I sometimes don't get it done because then I think of other things. But if I have a specific time it needs to be done and a specific subject, I can do that. So I mean, I guess could try that myself. I did it with one story that you edited for me, but I never did it again because it was going to be a book, and I did the first chapter, and I went, well, this could be a story, and so that's I think a lot of people don't know that because sometimes even when I'm writing now, it's should this be a novella or will it turn out to be one? Mostly I write short so it ends up, as you know, being a novella because I write them from screenplays in my head, but I change, all the screenplays I've written, and they're not even really, they turn out to be completely different, but I have the characters,
right.
and I try to listen to what you say because, and you did give me something, if you don't like a name that you've used in your story, but you keep using the name, just keep using it, and then at the end, I think that was a good idea that we could switch it then, because I find it difficult to change a name while I'm writing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times where writers can get bogged down in the writing process by like little things that don't
Yeah,
matter at the time, like a
right,
name of a character or like the name of a business or those sort of things where you can
right,
just go ahead and write with a placeholder and go back and change it later, but you don't
yeah,
want those things to slow you down.
right,
Like
and
there are
that's
things
what happens.
like like the time and place of the story that you do kind of have to know, or else you're going to have to
Yeah,
do a massive rewrite. But you could still do a massive rewrite later. But if you do a story, set in a certain year, you want to make sure any music that people are listening to already existed, or any food they
right.
eat already existed, and
I
that it
have
wasn't.
noticed in a lot of movies now, the songs they use I don't know when they're written, but they're already they're from the past. But so I
Right.
guess that's a good for them because then they know it's already something that's it's just people love those songs and they use them a lot, older songs,
Well,
so
and
they
also
don't have to know exactly about right that minute.
well, and also characters, just like regular people, don't necessarily listen to what's new right now.
Right, right,
You know, a
right. Yeah.
character who's living in 2025 could
Hmm.
listen to 80s music,
Right,
but a character living in the 80s can't be listening to 2025 music.
right.
And the same
Yeah,
thing about the kind of car they drive, what the city looks like that they live in. You know, you can't describe a building that wasn't built yet.
yeah.
And so if you're using the past, you have to make sure that you set your story in the past.
Right.
In the
'Cause
present,
right. Yeah.
even now, like someone who's listening to today's music probably is listening to the thing that just came out. But
Right.
because if they were aware of it, unless they're like a music character's a music critic or a huge fan,
Yeah.
they probably don't know it yet.
Right, right. So right. Yeah.
You know, usually things from a couple of years ago are the best for signposts.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many questions, that people, and I think that one of the things I want people, if they're listening, that if you have a question, ask people, because we're all not born knowing how to do this,
Right.
or we all don't have an editor that will fix it up like you fix mine up and go like, oh, this isn't right, but you already know how I write. So if you're using a new editor, you may not, or first time using an editor, you still have to have some of your say in it, but you also have to listen that you could have made a mistake or it wasn't right. And a lot of people do, say the same thing over because you think you know everything in your head, but you don't really know if your reader needs to know it 50 times because they don't. But you sometimes don't remember that you said it. So that's why you also need an editor to cut.
Well, I think one thing a lot of writers do wrong is that they write a first draft and then they think that's it. And it's important to get to a first draft. Like don't slow yourself down. Go ahead and finish
Yeah,
the draft. But then like put it in a drawer, close the file. Don't think about it for a short amount of time, and then go back to it and look at it again. You'll notice things
yeah,
that you didn't mean, or you started a part of a story and never finished that part. You don't need it,
yeah,
or the way this character acts in scene 7 is out of character with the way they acted before because you wrote scene 7 on a different kind of day.
right.
And like things you know as you're working on it, you're like too in the weeds. And so if you can put it aside, reset your brain, go look at it as a reader, you'll notice stuff that you didn't notice as you were writing it. Like
Which
I
is
do that,
hard to do, which is hard to do
right, but
though,
I do that with every short story I write. Like I finish them, don't touch them for at least a couple weeks.
Really.
Go back and look at them with fresh eyes, and I'll notice sometimes I have things that are wrong, but just things that could be better, or
Yeah,
could use more description, or has too much description, or I introduced a character who's not important. Why is he there? I could just get rid of him.
yeah.
That sort of stuff.
Well, right. And I think as writers, sometimes, when you've written a lot of characters, you sometimes, have to remember the character really well. And it's hard sometimes because you see the character, like I see the character, I know how they talk, but people in real life, I think, though, do repeat themselves a lot. So
Mhm.
that's the other thing. Sometimes you try hard not to repeat something, but when you talk to somebody, sometimes somebody can say something 10 times in the same conversation. Not that it's always good, but people talk how they talk. Depends how your character talks. And, you know, so I think that's an important thing is how your character talks and knowing the character.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
yeah. I think it's
You
something.
know,
Another thing I think people struggle with sometimes is that all their characters sound like the same person
yeah,
because they all talk like the writer, and
right.
so it's important to have, especially if there's like phrases that the author uses a lot in their own life.
Yeah,
They'll creep into every character, and maybe
yeah,
one character talks that way.
yeah.
But if you see the same phrases popping up in a bunch of different people that aren't common things, that aren't hi, goodbye,
You know,
it feels uncanny because
right,
it
and
is.
that yeah, see, that's the thing. But, it was interesting, the audio, Robin Schrock, who's doing my audio,
Mhm.
so we changed the name of, well, Dixie was the original one, and then I changed it to Dolly, and I said, "I didn't think this was a good idea because Molly was in it." So, but then we changed it to Charlotte. But what's interesting is when we were talking about voices, I didn't hear
Mhm.
it yet, but she thought that Charlotte
Uh-huh.
was probably from the South. And she's right. Well, she was from the South. So I haven't heard it yet, but she thought and her name was Dixie, and she was from the South. But I thought it was interesting that I never mentioned that to her, and she said, "I just thought by what you wrote that
Right.
that's where she should have been from."
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. It was interesting, and also, when an audio narrator is listening, that's hard. So you have to, because I find it difficult to listen to my work sometimes. Um, but when I listen to it, sometimes it doesn't feel like I even wrote it, and so I think that happens sometimes. And so she sent me the first few minutes of it, and then for a second I thought, "Oh, I don't like this voice because the driver's younger." And then I went, "Oh my God, the driver's only in it for a second because he has another driver." So I went like, so in my brain, I got confused already because I have a lot of different kind of characters. See, some people just only write a few. As you know, I have a lot of characters,
Mhm.
which isn't always great, but it's hard. I mean, how do you feel about that when you're editing, not just mine, other people's, with all the characters they have?
I mean, it depends on the story. It depends. There's
Right.
there are stories where having a lot of characters is really important to the story. There's some where it's incidental, and there's some where it's a detriment. And so it depends on what the story is
Yeah.
and what those characters do. Like if there's a bunch of characters who all have one small role and go away,
Yeah.
that might be fine. That might be distracting. It just kind of depends on the story and
Right.
what the story is.
But, this just happened, it happened in it when she did that, and that made me think, that I did use that. But, when you do an audio, which is some reasons why people don't like audiobooks, they just like to read a book, but then I thought the voice, I went like, well, and then I realized myself that I made a mistake in my own head, that the driver was just a driver from New York. He wasn't from even Chicago. So we changed, so it didn't have to be changed. But I think once I finish a project, I try to like get them out of my head, which a lot of writers do, because then you don't want your characters to be the same. So I don't feel like any of my characters are the same. I don't know. You edit it. So do you feel that? I don't feel that. Do you ever feel that they're the same?
I mean, there
I
tends
mean,
to there's times you've reused a character, but generally, like
because like you've told me, let's say
yeah,
I use the same name Gracie a lot. I don't know. That's just happened. And I didn't even realize it till one day you told me that.
yeah, like one thing I do sometimes when I'm looking at stories is once I finish one, I'll notice sometimes I've used a name that I've used before.
Yeah.
I'll just replace it.
Yeah.
Or like in the fiction book that came out last year, there's one last name that's in it twice, and the characters aren't related in any way. It's just years apart. I used a common last name, but I do realize if those stories hadn't already been published in magazines, I probably would have changed it for the book. But
Yeah.
they were already
Right.
published. I didn't want to tinker with it too much.
Right. Because it is difficult. I know a lot of people are on the show and they say they have like a whole book where they write everything down about the character. I don't think that's really
Yeah.
a bad idea. It's just sometimes I don't do that. I just see them one way. So I kind of see them, but I think that's also when you do screenplays that trains your brain a certain way. So the person's probably going to look that way all the way through because that's what I see. You know, People have said when they read my books, they read it's like a movie because that's why a lot of them aren't that long because I think, oh, well, this is over because the movie's over, end of story. But then I do have an issue that I go, uh-oh, I think they needed more. I have to know more about them. So I'm working on that myself to make my books longer, which I don't know that'll work, but I'll try because I see it myself that it's a mistake. So sometimes you have to notice your own mistakes and try to correct them if you can.
But it also depends on the story and the subject matter and what you're trying to do with the book. Like some books need to be 600 pages long, and a lot of books don't. And some books
Yeah.
work better as a novella, and others
Yes,
you finish it and you want more length.
I was talking to a reviewer about that, and some stories do, I guess, need to be 600 pages.
Mhm.
I don't
Especially if there's
think
a
I
lot of
would
world.
want to read one. I can't. 600 is a lot
But if there's a lot
for
of
me.
world building and a lot of
Yeah.
like you have to explain who everybody is, and if you're reading something like a Game of Thrones or a lot of fantasy novels, there's because they're
Yeah.
set in a different world, you have to learn a lot about the
The
place you
world.
are. Yeah,
Right.
which takes up a lot of words to do it well.
Right.
But
Which
if you're doing
yeah.
if you're doing a romantic comedy that's 600 pages long, something's probably wrong.
Right. It's a series. It's a
Right.
series maybe,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
could be now, that because there are so many series,
Mhm.
so it could be short, I don't know. I mean, look at I think, people when they listen to the shows, when they call me in person or talk, writing is not easy. So there is so much that goes into writing a book. Even like they'll say, "Oh, I'll write a children's book," but there's a lot that goes into it. So do you want to, talk about how you feel when you get a manuscript? What
Mhm.
if the person that you're reading the manuscript is way off on what they're, how they're writing this book it should have been shorter, or they missed a lot of things. What do you tell them? Because sometimes people are pretty set on what they do.
I mean, it depends what I'm reading it for. So if I'm reading it because they want it edited, or I'm reading it because I'm
Right.
reviewing it for a magazine, like
Okay, if
those are different
somebody's
readings.
coming to you, they want it
Uh,
edited.
I mean, honestly, one of the reasons that I try not to really do that anymore is a lot of people have this idea that like what they finished is done,
Yeah.
and they just need the commas fixed. And like,
Right.
and if they're
Yeah.
still publishing it, they can do that. But a lot of them think that their book is going to be this huge bestseller that's going to go out to
Right.
random houses going to pick it up,
Yeah.
and you a lot of times have to disabuse them of that notion, because even if it is great, they're only going to take a small percentage of what they get,
Right.
and a lot of times it's less than great. It might be fine, it might be okay, it might be worth reading, but a lot of people seem to think that their work is like, this is the book that's going to change everything.
Right. Makes it right.
I'm,
And
I'm
that
going to be a
doesn't
million. I'm
yeah.
going to be a
Right.
millionaire, and it's like
Yeah.
unless you're Stephen
Well,
King or
that's the
J.K.
other
Rowling, you're not
thing.
going to be a
People
millionaire.
think, right, you
Yeah.
have like 10, 12, 15 books, 20 books. People write 100, they think, oh my God, they're rolling around. They're not rolling in money because it's very, very hard to get people to read your book. So I think that you have to write the best story you can and let it go if you can. But if you keep going back and forth, you'll never get anything done.
Well,
So
people
if
write
you,
books for different reasons.
yeah,
Sometimes they just want to have been able to write a book. They just want to be able
yeah,
to put their book online and see that they've written a book and be able to give their friends and family a gift of, here's the book I wrote. And there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that,
no,
but as long as they're realistic about that's what they're doing.
right. But some of them do write good books and they
Mhm.
should try to do anything and they don't want to market it. They don't want to come on an interview. They just do it. And then I'm thinking some of them think that it'll buy like magic. It'll get, a lot of reviews or a lot of people are buying it. But these days, more than even 20 years ago, people are lucky they can do independently published books. Years ago, you'd have to go to publishers and you get reviews. You remember that you'd have to send your book to a publisher or, I mean, to a review place, and you
Yeah.
didn't know if they even reviewed your book because they didn't write back. You'd somehow see it somewhere if you were lucky.
Well, usually if you're
It's
with,
different.
again, but it depends whether you're doing it yourself or you're doing it through a publisher. So usually if you do it through a
Yeah.
publisher, they'll get an advanced copy of the review.
Yeah.
So they'll send it out. They don't know for sure whether or not the magazine's going to publish it. But when the
Right.
magazine is going to publish it, they'll send it back to the publisher,
Right.
mostly just to fact check. So they just want to make sure they have like your name spelled right, the title, what the final title is going to be. Because and actually, this is probably something writers should know, is that when you're talking about the review magazines, so the ones that actually go out to bookstores, to libraries,
Yeah.
the ones that most schools, libraries, bookstores base their sales decisions on. So those are like Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Forward, School Library Journal, ALA Book List, which is the American Library Association's magazine, and a few others. They they're usually going to review the book based on what's called an ARC, or advanced reading copy.
Right. Right.
And so the version they're getting, the book's not out yet. The book's not going to be out for a while, and it's an interim version of the book that's pretty close usually to what the final book's going to look like.
Yeah.
But there might be one more round of proofreading or one more round of fact checking.
Yeah.
And so part of why they're sending the review back to the publisher in advance, first of all, if they do the timeline right, that means the quotes from the review can go on the back of the book.
Right.
Because obviously once the book's out, you can't put a quote on the back.
Right.
But also they're making sure that, with the language that's quoted in the review hasn't changed. So that's why the publisher gets to look at it. They don't get to say this is a bad review, don't publish it. But
Right.
if it says, you quoted a statistic and you've updated the statistic,
Amazon,
there's a
because
chance they fix
Amazon
it.
does not take reviews off. I mean, they take it off if they don't think it's legit, but they don't take it off just because it's a bad review. They won't.
Well, that's user reviews. That's different. That's a whole other.
Well, right, but sometimes it's really bad for the author because people, some reviews, people, they're reviewing it, and because that's what happens now. It wasn't like that in the past, but now because Amazon and everything else, everybody sees everything. Everybody wants people to review their book, but sometimes a lot of people don't even finish reading the book.
Well,
And
user reviews are essentially a comment section, like the
I
comment
know,
section
but they
under
but
an article.
people call it
Yeah,
like the ultimate. They think it's so.
they shouldn't.
It's not right. Exactly. So why shouldn't they? Okay, why shouldn't they? Because that's a good thing to talk about. So why shouldn't
Well,
they?
so user reviews are essentially internet comments. They're like a comment on an article you're reading.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing that they're on there. Like they're what people think about it, but those aren't being read by people other than people who are on the website to look for a book.
Right.
So if you're, you know, your library X, you're probably not going to the Amazon reviews to see whether or not you want to stock a book. You're going to
Yeah. Right.
review magazines to see whether or not you want to stock a book. Or you're getting an arc yourself and reading it to saying like, well, this is something we don't want to include. This is something we want to include.
Well,
But
that's interesting to think about because everybody's so impressed with Amazon reviews. If you have 1,000 reviews,
there is a magic number, and people no one knows for sure because it's an Amazon proprietary algorithm.
yeah,
People generally assume that like 50 is a magic number.
50.
That
It
might be
used to
right. That
be
might be wrong.
right. It used to
It
be
changes all the time, and
right.
it changes so that people don't skew the algorithm.
Yeah.
But once you get past that, whether you have, let's say you have 1,000 reviews, you have 4,000 reviews, it doesn't really matter. And there's an inherent suspicion of books that have a lot more reviews than they have sales, because how is that possible?
Right.
And there's a lot of bots. There are a lot of places where you can just buy reviews. There's a lot of people who intentionally manipulate the algorithm.
Yeah.
And so so if you're looking at something like Publishers Weekly, they're not doing that. They're only reviewing
Their own.
books they're getting from publishers, however they
Uh,
define publishers.
right.
Like some of them do self-publish, some don't. Some do only the big six. Some do anything but the big six. So there are big five now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I still have big six on the brain from years ago, but the big five publishers.
Yeah. And it is interesting because I have listened to some books by like movie stars or things
Uh-huh.
like that, and I think they just don't want to tell them, but some of them are so long and should be cut. And like I was listening to, I'm not going to say which one it is, but I'm thinking the first like 3 chapters should have been cut. That's it. And the author is saying, well, she's a big star. She says, I just wanted everybody to know everything about me. But I don't know that you have to say start like when you're like 2 years old or three. You know what I mean? I don't know that people, unless it's really detrimental if something very bad happens or very good happens that changes the course of your life. But just to tell people things just because you can makes them not want to finish. They could buy it, but they're not even going to listen. They can't because it's not good.
Is this an
But
autobiography you're talking about?
what?
Is this book an autobiography?
Yeah, and
Okay.
and a lot of those are just stories, which is fine. But I think that they should cut. You have to be able to cut. So if there are a lot of them are probably independently publishing now. I call it self-publishing was the word 20 years ago. I use it independently because you're making your own decisions. And if you trust yourself to do it right, some people just do it. But I mean, you have to have it edited, you have to have a good cover, you have to have a good story, you have to have a lot of things that make a book, and it can be independently published and do very well.
Mhm.
So it's not about years ago, people just say, oh, I'm going to self publish it. And then you could even think people, it was like almost like they pasted together. And some people did actually do that. Their covers were falling off. I don't know if you're probably too young. I don't know if you saw any of those, but you were probably in college and they'd come and they were like, they smelled of glue.
Mhm.
So that was self publishing. Independent publishing is you're the boss. So if you don't think that you know what you're doing, then don't do it. And don't be mad that it's not selling or people don't think it's good. Because sometimes, like even with directors, sometimes the director that writes, produces, and they do it all themselves. Not Clint Eastwood, because he does a great job at everything. But sometimes you need help. Like he does writing, directing, producing, because he's really good at it. But if you're not really good at it, and get yourself an editor first. Wouldn't you suggest that they get an editor? I mean, you are an editor. You may not do it as much as you did before for that type of reason, but they need to have it right.
Well, they need to get it right. However they do that, whether they do it themselves, have someone else they know do it, hire someone professionally, but again, it depends what their goals are. Like if they're trying to get it out to a big publisher, they definitely need to have it edited. If they're going to do it themselves, it's kind of up to them, but it's not going to be good if they don't have someone else look at it.
Because I mean, as much as reviews, you don't want someone to say, this book should never be written, and this person doesn't know what they're doing. That's bad. Any way you look at it.
Oh yeah, but with the internet comment, like it could just be they don't like the subject matter. That doesn't mean the book's bad. Other times,
So
it does
that's
mean
a
that
good
it's
way to
bad.
look
It
at
depends.
it. That it's right.
Well,
It's a good way to look at it that way. The way you're saying it now, it's just a comment.
Right, but like anything else, it's not so much how many people say it or whether it's good or bad. It's what they say. The same idea
Yeah.
in any job. You want constructive
Right.
feedback, whether
Yeah.
it's constructive praise or
Yeah.
constructive criticism. If the
Yeah.
feedback is, "Oh, this stinks," well, that's not helpful.
Right.
Exactly. If it's, "Oh, I liked this until these things happened and that seemed unrealistic based on what this character had done previously," like that's legitimate
Right.
feedback.
Right.
If it's just dumb, well, that's not helpful. And same
Yeah.
like, "This is great," that's not really helpful. But if it's, "This is great, I really loved how this happened and this happened, I really thought this was
Right.
really well done," like
Yeah.
that kind of constructive feedback is really valuable, whether you, especially before you publish, to see
Yeah.
why people you trust do
Yeah.
or don't like it and what they would suggest for improvement.
See, because if you're independent published, people have to think about sometimes, and you have to keep checking, because once you put it in a genre, sometimes they change your genre for no reason and it's not right. They made a mistake, literally. I mean, that's the truth. They make a mistake.
Who's they?
So
When you say they make a mistake, who makes a mistake?
Amazon, because they change it. Because I've seen in my own books, they'll go, this is nonfiction, and it's not nonfiction. So somewhere on some place, it could be changed. And a lot of people on my shows have said that so you have to keep, if you're independent published, you have to keep looking at your work to make sure the genre didn't change by mistake. And it does happen. And then no one's going to see your book. Because if it's in a totally different category, that's bad.
I mean,
And
it's not ideal, but it also doesn't matter that much, because
well,
no one's going into Amazon and looking up, the way they have genre structure. Like no one's going like mystery books and looking at all the mystery books. They're usually
they
looking
do.
at
What do you mean? You don't
most
think they
people
do?
most people search for a specific book or a specific author, and then they'll get algorithmic feeds about like, if you liked this, you might also like this. And then
Because I think people go like, I want a sweet romance, I want this romance, or I want contemporary. That's how they look.
I mean, there are probably some people who do that, but that's not the majority of users. The majority of people are connecting through, usually they're searching for something specific and link through Amazon.
I'm not exactly sure about that, because I think people have said that I, myself, I know that I'm looking and I'll look up just a certain type. And if your genre is wrong, which does happen. So that's why I'm saying it. It does. You can change it. They will change it and you can go in on your own if it's an independently published book, or tell your publisher. It does happen.
Oh, I'm sure
And
they make mistakes like any big
they
site
do make
does.
they make a lot of mistakes, they do. And they take off reviews because they think someone isn't a reviewer, and that is what they do. They're reviewers. But
but they are also looking at patterns too. Like it's not like there's a person sitting there doing it.
right.
It's an automated thing that's looking at, this person suddenly posted 400 reviews and bought 3 books.
I know it
Like,
hasn't happened to me,
right.
but it
That's what
has
it's
happened
doing.
to people. It has happened to people.
Of course. But
All right,
it's not like there's a they who's sitting there doing it. It's the algorithm
right.
is realizing there's a disconnect between sales and reviews that can't be legitimate.
Right.
And maybe they got a bunch of free copies and didn't get them from Amazon and they reviewed separately. Like that might
I think it's
happen.
very difficult for every author. I don't care if you're with a smaller publisher, it's just a lot to look at. You just have to pay attention to a lot of things. And, I think people, when they're writing, just try to write the best story they can.
Mhm.
Don't write just because somebody else writes a certain genre.
We'll never write to the market.
Okay,
Because
talk about that. That's a good thing. Okay.
especially for people who are writing for the first time, they look at what a lot of times we'll look at what's popular and be like, I'm going to write this thing that's popular.
Right.
And what's popular now is not necessarily going to be what's popular in 2 years or in 3 years or
Right.
whenever you finish the book
Right.
and get it out.
Yeah.
And so if that's what you want to write, because that's what you want to write, and that's the story you know how to do, go ahead and do it. But don't chase market trends if you don't know how to do that. Because
Right.
all you're going to wind up doing is writing a thing you're not pleased with,
Right.
that's not going to hit the market. And the people who are top in the market are either with big publishers or they're like the little book that broke through, and that's not
Yeah.
replicatable.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Right. Some books can break through and just do great. I mean, nobody, look, that's why I do this, because I think people should continue writing, try their best, and don't give up. I mean, it's important to keep going on because I do think people get better. Not everybody, but what would be your advice to people if they just don't, if they think they should stop and maybe they're really good? What would you tell them?
It depends what their goals are. Like
Right.
if they're okay with the idea of it's important to them to have the book out the way they want it to be out,
Yeah.
go ahead and publish independently.
Right.
But don't expect necessarily that it's going to do great in the market.
Yeah.
If it does, great, but you have to be okay with the fact it won't.
Right.
It depends what your goals are. If your goal is like you think you're going to make a bunch of money on this book and you're only going to publish it with the big five, you have to be willing to accept that may not happen.
And it's going to take
And
several
still give it
years. And it's going to take a few years to even get it
sure.
out there to publishers.
But if that's important to you, like go ahead and try it.
Right.
Like I'm a big believer in people should try.
Yeah.
But people also have to be realistic about whether or not, and sometimes it's not even a matter of quality.
Right.
Like you could write an amazing mystery book that gets rejected because the publisher already has 4 other amazing mystery books.
That's a good thing to say, right? Because that's true.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true. And it's not really a rejection of your work. It's just they can't do it. They only have a certain amount of titles and what they're going to do for the year.
Right.
And
sometimes there's just, sometimes your book is the 3rd best they've read in that category. And that doesn't mean it's bad. But also the fact they reject it doesn't mean it's automatically good.
Right, I know.
And so it's people having to be realistic about how good is their work. Who's the audience for their work? Are they trying to sell it to a publisher that is interested in that kind of book?
Right.
Because sometimes people just assume, well, every publisher wants my book. And like some do only one genre, some do very specific kinds of authors. Some have a very short list, some have a very long list. So you have to make sure you're looking at someone who might actually want to do your book.
See, for me, I tell people one thing that I think is true. In this time, 2025, in the last, since ebooks came out, whatever, you have a choice now. You can, if you didn't get published by the person you want to get published with, you still can publish independently. So I think years ago, this was not happening. And their projects were stuck in the drawer. So take out your projects, try to get it going again, and independently publish it. And make sure you go to a quality person. That to me is really, that's why when I met Robin from Fidelity, she's done all my books because I trust her. But I do know there are so many people out there that are not to be trusted. And that's what I think is important. Make sure that you go to some place that is going to do a good job when they publish your book.
Well, and there's also right now, especially with the rise of AI, and
Yeah.
There's a lot of scams targeting authors too. There's a lot of places pretending to be publishers, pretending to, we'll get you in book clubs and give you speaking fees, and it only costs X amount of money to sign up, and they're complete scams.
Right.
So just do your research.
That's what
for
I
anyone
think.
interested in this.
Right.
Like,
And I always tell people, you can call me. A lot of times people do call me and they want to know about writing a book and how they could do it. And by the time I'm done, finished with the conversation, telling them everything they need to be prepared for, they don't want to do it. So,
Mhm.
because it's not, even if it's independently published, it's the same thing. You still have to write a good story. You have to get it edited. You have to get a cover. You have to have some kind of a plan in your head. You can go on interviews. You can do a lot of different things, but you have to be, you have to be aware. It's not easy. And it is a lot of
Well,
work.
mhm. And it's a lot of work where very few are going to be super successful.
Right.
But I think the statistic is that 90% of
Yeah.
books sell fewer than 1,000
I
copies,
know.
and half of books sell fewer than
Yeah.
12. Not 1,200,
Yeah.
12.
I know.
And so you have to be willing to know if you sold, even if your book is good, but it's not in the right, if it's not a hit for whatever reason, if it's not good enough or it's not popular enough, it's not like you're going to make your money on this book.
Right.
It has to be out there for other
Right.
reasons.
And I think, going places and going to different, if you're a children's writer, if you can get in schools, because it's really hard now. It's very hard. And bookstores, sometimes they just don't want, authors to come. It's a lot. They have to do a whole program. I mean, it's work for them they don't want to do. They used to do it more. And so a lot of people, if they go to a, book event, they only sell 10 books and they don't feel like it was worth their time. So, but if you go there, you might come back another time and they might know you and you might sell more. So, just, there's a lot of different things, but you can't always give up if you just sell a few books. You just got to
Well,
do it.
well, you just have to look at the cost benefit analysis to you of everything.
Yeah, right.
Depending what your budget is, depending how much money you're willing to risk on it.
Yeah.
Like if you have the time to do a bunch of events,
Yeah.
do a bunch of
Yeah.
events. If it's going to take you away from other things that you need to be doing,
Yeah.
it might not be worth the investment. If you have the time and you can afford to do it, do it.
Yeah.
Like if the idea of like a book tour that goes city to city, that doesn't really exist for most people.
Yeah.
But if you have the money to fund it and want to do it, but just don't think it's necessarily going to work financially,
Right.
like be realistic about what you want to spend and what you're going to get out of the money you're spending.
Some places are a lot easier to have book events than others. Some of the smaller towns, they're very happy with when they have authors that, it's a small town and one of their own people have written a book.
Right.
They support them, and that's really nice.
Yeah.
It's not like that here. It's not.
Well, especially if you have an independent bookstore.
Yeah.
Like independent bookstores are going to be a much better shot for most authors
Yeah.
than Barnes and Noble, because Barnes and Noble doesn't have the resources to
Yeah.
do every person, every city.
Yeah, and I was at a Barnes and
But-
Noble, and
but
they
you're-
didn't have children's
Yeah.
books. And the people that booked me, which is of somebody from Barnes and Noble, this is years ago, and there was no children's books. They weren't in the store. So I'm thinking, well, of course I'm not. I didn't know that till I got there. So, years ago they did different things, but you should make sure that they have it in their bookstore, because if you're going to, it was a Barnes and Noble, but it was they did not sell children's books, and that's before I wrote other books. So you have to find out things, because they don't the event planners, a lot of them don't even have those anymore. They used to have that. Remember when they had a lot of I don't know that they do that anymore.
But again, it depends on the store. Like some stores do a lot of events, some stores do very few events.
And I think a lot of libraries, some libraries support people, others don't. I think people love to meet authors. I really believe that. I think that people like to meet authors because they always feel like, oh, maybe I could write a book, because people do think that way, and maybe they can. So maybe a word of advice from an author helps them. I had an issue. It's like somebody I was on the phone with at a big company. They said to me, "Oh," when they saw my website, this is a couple of years ago, and they go, "Oh, you wrote To Life," and I went, "Yeah, that was the book of Sale, the Holocaust survivor." And she said, "That book, after I read that book, I wanted to write. And so I want to thank you for that. I never thought I'd ever see, it was a big, how would you know? So you don't know where your books are. So if somebody enjoys something or gets something out of your book, just that's like the best. Authors love that. Don't you like when an author talks about your book? You like it.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody does. And it so I think if there's an author you like and you see them online or something, just tell them, even put a message them. It means a lot to us because it isn't always about money. It's about your message or something that's important to you they're reading. Do you feel that way?
Well, and even now, like one of the things that I enjoy most, because I get alerts anytime one of my books is mentioned in something, is I really like the ones that I know neither myself or the publisher contacted them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like when, for example, right now the voting book we talked
Yeah.
about. So PBS just put out a new Ken Burns documentary on the American Revolution recently, and they, along with it, published here's a list of other books you should read to supplement your viewing,
Yeah.
and it was on that
Yeah.
list,
You've been
which
on
is really
other
cool. 'Cause
lists too. You have some.
oh yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
but
thing.
it's cool. Like I didn't send that to them. My publisher
Right.
didn't send that to them.
Right.
They just independently,
Yeah.
someone at
Yeah.
PBS recommended my book for the list. That's cool.
Yeah. So you don't really, and to me, I prefer people that I don't know reading my books.
Right.
I love that. I was at a restaurant the other day and I go to the restaurant all the time. So one of the guys is the servers says, she looks right. It goes, oh my God. He goes, I was cleaning out my father's books, and his father's older, but still okay.
Mhm.
And he said, I saw because my picture was on the back of the book. It was, I don't know, he
Okay.
doesn't know what book, he doesn't remember which book it was, but his father's a poet. So his father
Mhm.
was reading my books. I'm thinking, how weird is that? And I didn't want my picture on the book. So Robin always says you need to have a picture. So I guess it was funny because otherwise, how would I know that this person's father was reading my book? And I was so happy. It makes, I don't know, it makes me feel so happy when someone is reading a book that I don't know.
Oh, for sure.
So I think,
Because
yeah,
you want your books to get to a point where it's not just your friends and family and people who know you or one
right.
degree removed. You want them to like have their own life.
Yeah. I'm not sure a lot of my family has read my books, and I'm not the best at marketing myself to people I know. A lot of people
Mhm.
are. I'm not the best, but I think if you're good at it, you can get your book to a lot of places if you are good at just when you walk in a store, you tell them you're a writer. People love that, but I just don't do that. But I think it's not a bad idea. You know,
Well, like one thing I'll do is if I'm in another city and I'm in a bookstore, like I don't go to a bookstore just for this purpose, but if I'm at a
right?
bookstore anyway, I will just check to see if any of my books are on shelf, and if they are, I offer to sign for them and I talk to
Ah,
them, and they're always really happy to do
that's
it.
good.
Because if they have 5 copies of my book, if I sign it for them, it's more likely to sell, so they're happy. And also a lot of times one of them has read it and wants to talk about
Yeah.
it, and that's cool.
Yeah. See, I think it's always a surprise, to authors. And I think that, someone shouldn't be embarrassed to come up to someone and say that because we love it. We do.
Mhm.
It's our work. We put so much into it. And for somebody to get, you know, interested in something we wrote, because it's hard, for
Mhm.
someone, to, write a book, not only that, but it's hard to know who's reading your book. But when you do, to me, that's the greatest. So if you see an author, just say hello to them and they'll be happy, that
Yeah.
you've read their book. That's what I think it's great. And I hope they do more book signings at stores, but they maybe someday.
But there's some that do one every night.
Yeah, but those
It depends on the store.
but they're from a lot of them are bigger authors that they take in.
But the ones that do one every night, they have all kinds
All
because
right.
they have to be able to fill however many
That's
days.
true. That's true. Well, I think that being said, I think I should do that myself, but I don't always do what I say, as you know. You for sure know that. So what would you like to talk about for the end of the show? What people what they should do to help themselves try to focus on their writing.
I would say like if they have an idea that they really love, like write that idea. Like don't worry about the market, don't worry about what you're going to do with it afterward, don't worry about an artificial deadline. Like write the book, write it the best way you can, put it aside for a little while, go back and fix it up, and then decide. Then you start thinking about what kind of publisher would fit this book,
Yeah.
what kind of audience would like this book.
Yeah.
But don't write like I want my book to be for this age group. And
Yeah.
if you don't know for sure, write the story and then see what age group
Yeah.
fits the story.
Yeah. Well, the young adult
like kind of reverse engineer
young
it.
adult is a tough one because, like you said at the beginning, the young adult, a lot of adults
Right.
are reading the young adult books. And so that's why your books are written not just for the young adult, but for anybody that, would like to know more about voting in a decent, good way where you're not promoting one side or the other. You're just talking about the facts. Is that
Well, and so in nonfiction I do young adult, then in fiction I just do adult, but
right?
also young adults read it. So
Yeah.
it kind of works both
Right. So you
directions.
just don't know.
And same thing, like when I was a little kid, I read books for adults too. So
Yeah.
it's all over the place depending on what you're writing.
I'm sure
So
you read a lot of books.
I still do.
I
Yeah.
know.
But
And
in any given moment, I'm reading 3 books.
right, that's a good thing. And I just thought of something the other day that I didn't think about before. A lot of my books are reviewed by men. And so
Mhm.
I added now in the description men and women because I think sometimes uh there are a lot of men that like these stories. If it's a romance, it's not it's just a story. But because we have to say what kind of a story, it's, if it's what type of romance it is. I don't really put that in as much, but I added in the description because I think it's important because a lot of men have read my books, not just women, you know, because if the title says love in it, doesn't mean it's just, some romance book. My first signing was like that. A man said, "I read your book, but you know what? It says love in it on the title." So I mean, so because I think don't cut your audience, in half by saying it's just for women or it's not for men.
Well, I mean, there's no genre, no kind of book that is only for one audience.
Right. But I think
And I
people
think,
sometimes feel
yeah,
that way, that, okay, I'm writing a book for women. But my books are, let's just put it this way, my books are family and relationships, the last several of them. So I can see why men, because there's a lot of men in the characters are men. So I think I write a lot of men. What would you say? Don't you? I think I do write men.
right. But there's also tons of men who read books where all the characters are female, and tons of
Right,
women who read all the
right.
books where all the characters are male. Like it's just the characters and the audience don't necessarily match.
Yes.
Like you can write young adult books about adults.
Yeah,
You can write young adult books about children. You can write young adult books about young
right.
adults.
But I've just figured that out myself because of, one of my narrators, he loved my stories. So I'm thinking, well, here's a man. So I mean, so don't cut yourself short and just market to one audience. Do broader because we don't know who's reading our books at all. So I think that's kind of tricky to figure that out because it's all about, which we didn't talk, which we're not going to really talk much about marketing, but that is the problem. It's marketed a certain way, but try to do, if you see that you're missing something, try to figure out a way to market it to where you think you should go. Because if you're an independent author, and even if you are traditionally published, sometimes they don't put you where they should. So you have to kind of be your own best friend when you have a book. Wouldn't you suggest that to people? I would, that,
Well, I mean,
you
I
know,
mean, all authors have to do some publicity for
yes,
themselves.
exactly.
Like like publishers will do some things for you, and there's some things that only a publisher can do.
Right.
But at the same time, like you have to have a social media platform of some kind. You have to talk about the book. You have to make sure especially if you're dealing with certain subject matter, you want to make sure you have like other things about the subject matter
Yeah,
that aren't about the book. Like you don't want your social media platform to always be book, 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 book,
I
book.
know.
You got to have more than that.
I know. Because I think to me, marketing is very stressful. So I have to figure out a way, even for myself. That's why I think people listen to me because I'm telling them the truth. I know this is it's very stressful if you have to market your book and try to write. So if and you can get people to help you market, but you still have to have some sense of what they're putting out because it's your voice that people are
Mhm.
interested in. Like, even if you have a post, if it doesn't sound like you, then people tend to know that. They want you as the author. They don't want somebody else saying something about you. They don't mind it, but I mean, they like people like after a radio show, like a podcast, like I'm doing. People like to hear the voices of people and
Mhm.
what they have to say. So I'm so thankful that you came on today. Is there anything that you'd like to say to people that we missed?
I would just, if people are looking for the fiction collection, it's available as an ebook, an audiobook, or a paperback.
Okay, I
It's
have
called
you. I
Animal
also,
Husbandry.
I'm going to post it with
Yeah.
your
Oh, great.
website on it. Yeah, for the
Yeah.
show.
So they're all available as ebooks. Most of them are paperback and hardcover. Some are just paperback. And that one's an audiobook.
Okay. And
Not read by me. Read
no,
by a guy called Sebastian who does a great
right,
job.
right, yeah. No, there's some people can do their own. Most people are better off with a narrator because it is hard. You have to have the breath for it, and it has to go a certain way. So it's not an easy job to be a narrator. It's hard. They do a lot of work. Let's put it that way. So, all right. So this is, I think, the last show for the season. To wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and we'll be back after in the new year, unless I decide, which possibly could happen, to have another show in between. But I'm actually trying to write more, and if you have any questions, always look me up or marshacaspercook.com or send me an email. I'm happy to help you if you need any help. And the show will be out probably on all the formats where you listen to your shows by later the day and tomorrow. So, and Jeff, I'll send you that. And thank you so much. And thank you for all the
Oh, thank you.
work that you've done for me on my books, cutting them, making them sound good, and not hassling me at all. But some people, their editors just drive them crazy. But I I trust you, so I let you just do what you think is best. And so far, it's been great. So and it's a lot of years, but I forget you're getting older, so am I. But I don't want it.
BPC alternative.
Yes, it does. All right. Happy holidays to everybody, and thanks again, Jeff. I appreciate it. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you. Bye bye.